Prime Minister Ma'in Abdul Malik holds meeting with the P5 ambassadors over current situation in the country. In a new crime, Houthi ballistic missiles target a residential area in Ma'rib, killing other civilians. The world celebrates International Statistics Day, while Yemenis are but numbers of refugees and victims. Good evening and welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fouad. The permanent 5 heads of mission in Yemen held a Zoom meeting with Prime Minister Ma'in Abdul Malik. The meeting tackled opportunities to revive the peace process in the country. They called upon all parties to facilitate the work of the government to provide essential services and maintain security in the country. U.S. Central Command said in a tweet that its minesweeper ships, USS Sentry and U.S. Gladiator, made a transit through Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The transit is the first of its kind for U.S. ships, marking the first time for these special operational ships to enter the Red Sea in 7 years. A number of Houthi militia were killed and others were wounded in Al-Qasara front, west of Ma'rib, in an ambush set by government forces. A military source said that the ambush targeted Houthi elements who were trying to infiltrate a military position. In the same line, government forces targeted with artillery movements of the militia in other fronts in Ma'rib, causing casualties and losses among them. To the north of Ma'rib, Houthi militia targeted a residential area near Al-Sahn camp with a ballistic missile, killing 6 civilians and injuring 10 others. To Abdiya, south of Ma'rib, locals said that the joint forces and Houthi militia is conducting a campaign of raids and massive arrest of opposition members. The locals indicated that Houthis detained more than 500 people, including children. According to local sources, the militia blew up 2 houses in Al-Hajar and continued to close all outlets leading to Abdiya to prevent civilians from leaving. The deputy governor of Ma'rib directed to open new displacement camps to contain new displacement waves. Officials requested coordination with humanitarian organizations to urgently provide shelter, food and water to the displaced people, while accusing some organizations of slowing down aid delivery. Yemen is racing the time to avoid the horror of famine. With millions of people who are on the brink of hunger, the most vulnerable of those are children. More on this story is in the following report.
They live their lives without order and far from the modernity and civility. Camels and goats accompany them in a life that they inherited from their parents and grandparents thousands of years ago. They are nomadic Bedouins. In the heart of the empty quarter desert east of Ma'rib Governorate, more than 700 nomadic families live. How do their children get education in the middle of the desert?
We are nomads. We roam all over the lands. We have schools that we decorate with nets and tents that cannot accommodate our students. As the increase in the number of students forces them to sit outside the tents.
The school of the nomadic Bedouins is a sprawling school. Classes are scattered in the form of mobile tents in the middle of the desert. The distance between one school and another is from 30 to 50 kilometers, and it is the classrooms in which the children of the nomad gather from all over the area to receive their daily lessons.
They follow the grass and water. The class moves where water and grass are available for sheep and camels.
We documented a school day for nomad school in the Ruwaik Desert on the borders of Al-Abr region. This is how their school day begins. A morning queue on this hot sand and under the heat of the sun. Then they move to this tent that cannot protect them from the sun.
We sit under a tent on the sand. The school lacks many things, and we all suffer from these problems. First, the textbook. We don't have different levels at the same school. The whole school is one class. We teach one class for all students of different ages and with the same textbook. Secondly, as for the class, we want them to provide us with enough classes and mats.
The tent is hot. There is no mat on the sand. We wanted chairs and books, curricula and tents.
This school is based on the generosity of the nomads to educate this segment that has been absent from the eyes of the organizations and the interests of the education office in the Maghreb Governorate.
As for the student statistics for nomadic schools, there are 120 girls and 180 boys. These are the ones who are present and registered during this year. As for the deprived of education, approximately 300 students did not enroll because of the difficulty of access to school or the unavailability of classes.
Education is the basic right for all. It is the route for any country to achieve any progress. When you pull out this route, you remove any hope for children or for any country to be better. These people only need urgent attention from government agencies and relevant organizations, as no education has negative effects, especially in such a harsh environment.
In Shabwa, government forces and the popular resistance attacked El Safra and El Salim areas. The forces sought to take control of positions in Usaylan district and cut off the Houthi militia supplies in Harib. Turning to Hodeidah, where the joint forces responded to the Houthi fires from the east and south of the city. A military source added that the joint forces spotted Houthi infiltrations and directed fires on them, killing and injuring a number of militants. In El-Durayhimi, joint forces silenced fires that shelled populated areas. The rebels were inflicted with losses in lives and equipment. The world celebrates the International Statistics Day today. Yet the only statistics that heads the Yemeni scene is that of displaced refugees or victims. The following report has more on this story.
Today marks the World Statistics Day. The day is celebrated every 5 years. In the past 7 years, Yemeni's lives have become mere numbers and statistics for the victims of war, which vary in shapes and numbers. The United Nations announced that 1,424 civilians were killed during 4 years as a result of mines. The United Nations humanitarian coordinator in Yemen said that landmines and explosive remnants continue to kill and injure civilians and pose significant risks to relief workers. Likewise, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, reported that 4 children every day are killed or injured in Yemen due to fighting. 10,000 children have been killed or injured since the start of the fighting, and these numbers are the case that the United Nations has been able to verify. Many child deaths and injuries are not recorded. Yemen, as the most difficult place in the world for a child to live in, it is getting worse, said James Elder, the UNICEF spokesperson.
Equivalent of 4 children every single day. These, of course, are the numbers that the United Nations can verify. Many more child deaths and injuries go unreported.
As for the displacement situation, Yemen remains the world's largest humanitarian crisis and aid operation. The crisis is the result of a brutal armed conflict that escalated 6 years ago. In 2020, the conflict intensified. Number of front lines increased from 33 to 49, and 172,000 people were displaced since then, bringing the number of internally displaced people to at least 4 million. Food insecurity and malnutrition are the main drivers behind the number of people in need. 16.2 million people will go hungry this year. Over 2.25 million cases of children aged between 0 and 59 months, and more than 1 million pregnant and lactating women are projected to suffer from acute malnutrition in the course of 2021. In addition, over 15.4 million people are in need of support to access their basic water and sanitation needs, of whom 8.7 million are in acute need. To sum up, these statistics represents a tragic convergence of the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Yemen has become destruction and wreckage. Will the recent international efforts put an end to this mess? Only one may wonder.
The U.S. aid agency called upon the Houthi militia to working on preventing an imminent catastrophe in the Red Sea. The agency asked the rebels to rescue the safer tanker from leaking through engaging in negotiations and acting immediately to prevent 1.1 million barrels of oil from polluting the region. Houthis continue to obstruct UN team from assessing the damage in the tanker, given chances to a looming oil spill. Economic failure in Yemen hits all sectors in the community. The war continues to ravage the country and officials doing nothing to stop the deterioration. More on the story is in the following report.
The economic crisis is hitting hard in a war-torn country. The 7-year war damaged the economy and caused poverty and starvation. Yemeni Minister of Planning estimated the direct losses in the economy at nearly $90 billion. The country suffers from unprecedented economic contraction and the infrastructure was heavily affected due to war. United Nations humanitarian organizations in their latest report said that 20.7 million Yemenis are in need for humanitarian assistance in 2021. More than half of the population faces alarming food insecurity. The rial lost about 180% of its value against the foreign currency. This loss catapulted prices, drove down the standard of living, and downsized income by nearly 60%. Last July, the World Bank described Yemen as the Middle East top country in the poverty index. The bank referred this fact to the flaring conflict since 2015, reminding that Yemen lives the worst humanitarian crisis all over the world. Within this image, the United Nations warned recently that a looming famine could occur. The war and the difficult access to livelihoods affect the lives of millions. The country's economic inputs, in addition, have been greatly affected by slumping oil returns that make up 70% of the Yemen's revenues. Again, the United Nations warned that despite the aid that comes to Yemen, people are affected as well. Aid agencies that help nearly 13 million people are starting to run out of money. This fact could put them into slashing food aid to 4 million people by the end of the year. The number, however, is likely to rise. Bearing all of that in mind, people in different areas in the country went out to the streets. They protest against the deterioration of economy, the absence of services, and the government inaction. Demonstrations in Abyan voiced people's discontent. The same was true for other areas in Yemen during the past weeks in Taiz and Hadramaut. This alarming situation should make officials do more to end war and revive the economy.
Yemen is racing the time to avoid the horror of famine, with millions of people who are on the brink of hunger. The most vulnerable of those are children. More on the story is in the following report.
Children's nutrition is increasingly threatened with consequences throughout the life cycle, and acute malnutrition is now at serious levels across Yemen. Only 15% of children are eating the minimum acceptable diet for survival, growth, and development. The international report confirmed that the conflict has devastated the Yemeni economy, as the gross domestic product has split since 2015, putting more than 80% of the total population below the poverty line. At the beginning of last June, the World Bank estimated Yemen's infrastructure losses as a result of the raging war at about $8.5 billion. International aid organizations and United Nations agencies have warned that the Yemeni economy is on the brink of a collapse. Yemen is also experiencing the impact of a financial crisis, which promoted the Yemeni Money Exchange Association in Aden branch to start a comprehensive strike in protest against the deteriorating economic situation and the deterioration of the local currency. For nearly 7 years, Yemen has been witnessing a war that has killed 233,000 people, and 80% of the population of about 30 million people has become dependent on aid to survive in the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, according to the United Nations. Yemenis hold Houthis responsible for the multiple crises the country is experiencing, as the rebels insist on military escalation. The number of Yemenis facing significant levels of food insecurity continues to increase. The famine that struck the country in the spring of 2017 and threatened more than 7 million people created great fears. The head of the United Nations Food Agency issued a warning that 16 million people in Yemen are heading towards starvation, noting that in the absence of funding, the past is that famine in Yemen is a time bomb and the world must act now.
World Health Organization announced about 65% of the population in Yemen is subject to malaria. The organization stated that half of the health facilities in Yemen are partially functioning, noting that the facilities lack staff and medical equipment. The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 21 new cases of the COVID-19 in 5 governorates. Also, 8 deaths were recorded, plus 13 recovered cases. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 9,596, including 1,821 deaths and 6,128 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. Prime Minister Ma'in Abdul Malik holds meeting with the P5 ambassadors over current situation in the country. In a new crime, Houthi ballistic missiles target a residential area in Ma'rib, killing civilians. The world celebrates International Statistics Day, while Yemenis are but numbers of refugees and victims. This is the end of the news. It was Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.